Hi, everyone. Welcome to Foresight's Fellow Mentorship Gathering. This is our quarterly gathering in which we just have a little chat amongst our fellows, and we always invite one person that we think fellows can benefit from. And we usually try, if we can, to also make these videos available publicly so that afterwards other people can benefit from it if they are in a stage of their career where these sessions are useful. Okay, before we start with Christine, I would love to hear perhaps 30 seconds, and I'll just go down the list here in terms of names that I see them about our fellows. So Aaron, if you want to kick us off, that would be wonderful.
Sure thing. My name is Aaron. I'm currently running a hedge fund where we earn to give. So I cap my salary at $70,000. I've been very public about that. And then anything above that, we donate to mostly near-termist causes in the EA landscape, but also more recently, some long-termist causes. Yeah, so that's my primary role right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anastasia, do you want to say a few words about it?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anastasia. I just finished my PhD in William Shee's lab at Harvard, working on DNA nanotechnology, and decided to stay at the Peterson Institute as staff scientist in molecular robotics.
Very cool. Okay, next on up we have Iqbal.
Hello, my name is Iqbal Utama. I am currently a postdoctoral researcher at Northwestern University, molecular functionalization on nanoscale materials for applications in quantum information science toward making a building block for quantum computing.
Awesome. Very cool. Next on up, we have Michael.
Hi, guys. I'm a postdoc in Arizona State University. I'm working on DNA nanotechnology, specifically on simulating those systems and creating design software for it. That's it.
Super. Thank you. Next on, we have Timothy.
I'm also at Northwestern finishing up my PhD, 3 more months-ish, 4. And I work on combining synthetic biology with lipid nanoparticles.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we'll try to make those sessions useful for you. And again, if you have any questions that you want to ask at any point, just feel free to drop them in the chat or raise hand. Well, in terms of a brief intro as to who Christine is, at least like to me, and we'll get into the most kind of like general bits a little later. But I remember when I was studying philosophy of science at the London School of Economics, I came across Foresight on the internet, and it was it really broke my brain that there was this organization out there who thought really hard about positive long-term futures that we want to be moving to as a civilization, and also had a very hard science and tech base in terms of participants that were really determined to get us there. And so I cold emailed Foresight and asked if there's anything I could possibly do to help. And then the next email I got back was, why don't you come over and just check it out? And over was the Bay Area in San Francisco. And so I went. And that was, I think, 10 years ago now, maybe a little longer even. And I was under the extreme fortune to be taken on by Christine, who basically just shoved me out there and was like, you can do all these things that I had never done before. And then she really had my back and picked up the pieces whenever I made mistakes. And so I think, Christine, you've been like incredibly influential, not only founding or co-founding Foresight and then making it as an organization that has existed for 35 years. But I think you're also an incredible onboarder for young people that try to do ambitious things. And you have this kind of like really outstanding belief in that they can do these things, and that if they fail, that there's really good advice. And really good, just a really great kind of level of support in their back for making sure that in the future people do better. So thanks a lot for all the work that you've done to raise Foresight. Thanks a lot for all the work that you are continuing to do to raise Foresight staff as we're onboarding more and more people. And then in general, you've been doing the kind of same work for other Bay Area and other organizations really around the world at this point. And so you really are this kind of like secret weapon that many kind of like early nonprofit founders or people that are in their early stages raising money or in their early stages figuring out where they want to go in their career can call on when they don't know what to do. So thanks a lot for the work that you do. Perhaps you can start us off with a little bit of like, how did you get to where you currently are? And then we can kick us off with the more general.
Yeah. How's my sound, Allison? It's good?
Okay.
Okay. So I was studying chemistry at MIT as an undergrad when I met Eric Drexler, who was working on looking at the future of molecular machines. That's how he thought about it. Most people would say, oh, he was reading about biotechnology. But his insight at the time was, gee, these molecular machines, they don't have to be limited to biological ones. We can certainly engineer proteins, and that will happen, but ultimately the goal might be to get beyond being dependent on these soft biological materials, which are wonderful at what they do, but they are limited in what they can do. So that was his insight. And once you really understand that point, you get very excited. You envision a wide variety of technological developments that you feel are going to happen. You don't know when, but you're pretty sure they're going to happen sometime. So we both were pretty excited, and we decided there needs to be a book and there needs to be a nonprofit organization to get the word out on this and to develop these ideas further. And so we started Foresight and worked on it for decades. And now, of course, you're all involved and you see how it's going. So it's been a wild ride in terms of meeting some of the most exciting, interesting people doing the best work over these past decades here, not just in Silicon Valley here, but we interact, of course, with people doing it around the world. So it's been exciting. And yeah, I've learned a lot of things. I've made some mistakes. I hope to share some of those with you so that you can not make my mistakes.
Yeah, well, what were the things that you wish you knew back then when you started out that perhaps our fellows can benefit from?
Well, one of the less cheerful things I wish I had known is that many sectors of the world are pretty dominated by incumbents. Now, if you're on this call or if you're watching this video, you probably are an innovator, right? You want to change something. You want to bring some new idea into the world. It could be in science, it could be in technology, it could be in society, any kind of an idea. You want to change things. Well, sometimes there's a whole bunch of people who would rather you not do that because they are getting income from the current situation. This doesn't make them bad people. It means they have a family to support, they have a mortgage bill to pay, and they just are not they're not excited about what you're doing. So, and some sectors of the world are much more this way than others. So that's one of the reasons why the world of software is so dynamic. It is relatively open to innovation. It is relatively easy to jump in and do something exciting in software. But the more visible something is, the more there's already lobbyists involved, things like that, the harder it is to do innovation. And then some of you are in academia. Boy, academia is so political. We all know that. We all say that. But do we really deeply understand how extraordinarily political it is? It is, and it's getting worse, okay? It's gotten worse over the decades since I was at MIT. So these affect innovation and what you guys can accomplish and how you go about it. So that would be my main message. Now, some people have such an extraordinarily dynamic personality and energy that they can overcome these barriers. Elon Musk comes to mind, right? He is a very disruptive guy and has been successful. Is there an Elon Musk on this call? Possibly, right? And that's what Foresight Fellows are like. But it's hard, right? It's super hard. So if you want to have a high chance of success, you might want to target your activities on something where there's not a lot of opposition and where you have some allies. Like some of you are in academia, you need a really strong mentor, obviously, and I'm sure you have one, but it has to be someone who is good at figuring out what the new areas are. For example, just even if your mentor has a Nobel Prize, that does not guarantee that he or she is going to be able to get you a successful place in academia. Even that does not do the job. So you have to be extremely politically savvy to make it in academia, which is maybe not the kind of thing that you like doing, right? That may be not why you got into this at all. You wanted to do science or technology or some social science. But that's academia, just how it is. So those are some things I wish someone had sat me down and told me when I was in college at MIT.
Yeah, I hear that all the time, that people that, want to flee the hardcore competitive landscape that's out there in the private sector and just do like hard kind of and basic science and tech and more this blue sky thinking thinking they can do it in academia. And then they discover all the fighting that goes on for smaller grant monies that are like usually targeted to incremental things. And it is something that people are much more open about now, but it's definitely something that I think is still not as well known as it could have been. Perhaps thinking along your career path, were there a few like pivotal moments that really kind of changed the way that your career went? And if so, how do you think about making these decisions where, for example, you have perhaps two different offers on the table, like kind of like a fork in your career path, and you have to decide which way?
Well, there's two ways to come at it. You can say, which of these decisions is going to make me more successful in a conventional way? Or you can say, which of these options makes me deeply excited about doing work on this? And there's no right answer here. It's really about what your goal is. I have always made the second decision myself. I have always chosen what do I think is exciting? What do I think is going to change the world? Where do I get to work with the most brilliant, innovative people? These kinds of things. Those choices are not necessarily the ones which give you the most traditional, conventional success in the near term or even in the long term. So it's really, to the Foresight Fellows and anyone watching this video, there's no right answer here. It's more your personality type. I always went the second way, and I still do. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the first way. It's perfectly okay to make the conventional choice if that's the thing that makes you comfortable and happy. For the Foresight Fellowship program is generally for the people who make the second choice. So that's what we're going to focus on here in the rest of these questions, I think.
Wonderful. And when looking back, whether if you have like skills or attributes that you didn't know how important they were to develop, and in hindsight, you're like, oh gosh, this really took me a little while to get onboarded to. And now in hindsight, this is a secret skill that I wish I had just developed a little bit sooner. I think like soft skills, for example, are like incredibly important. And they are, interestingly, for example, more important in the Bay Area than, for example, in Germany, where I'm from. I think Germany is like incredibly like merit driven and an incredible like humble, I think, work environment where you don't really talk very much about your successes. And coming to the Bay Area, I had to learn a lot more to be much more frank and outgoing and just a lot more like plugged in and proactive about also highlighting things that I do, which felt deeply uncomfortable for me in the beginning. But I think the culture is just different across different sectors and in different countries. And so I wonder if there's like a specific skill set or like a specific kind of like niche where you thought, oh, damn, I wish I'd done this a little bit earlier. That would have really helped my career along.
Well, I think what I mainly teach people now is fundraising. And that's a skill that you need, whether you're in academia, whether you're in the for-profit sector, the nonprofit sector. If you're an innovator, wherever you are doing innovation, someone's going to fund it, unless you are a high net worth individual yourself, right? Or have family money. The funds to do your work have to come from somewhere. So I think, let me get it some water here. So I'd say that as early as possible, start to try to figure out, in my area, my industry, or my academic sector, where does the money come from? Who is getting that money for the work I'm doing? If you have who's the principal investigator, they're probably getting the money. And in that case, can you help? Don't just sit back and let the money come to you. That's not going to make you successful, because you're not always going to have somebody else raising money for you. Get in there and figure out how this is done, and just start helping. Whoever you work with is probably going to love it that you want to help raise the money, right? So just start very early. The other thing is the value of just plain old dogged persistence in anything that you do. This is a useful book. It's called, can I get this? The Formula. It's hard to get it to, I can't fool the algorithm to let you see this book. The Formula by Albert Laszlo Barabasi. And he says, your chance of success has little to do with your age. It's shaped by your willingness to try repeatedly for a breakthrough. And that's something I expect you guys will be doing, right? You're not just going to try one time to make a breakthrough. There's a good chance your first one isn't going to work, but you're not going to give up, right? You're going to keep going. And that's what's going to make the difference.
Yep, I agree. And I think also one thing that I think I noted is that at least when you're not in the US, I always thought that, oh, well, in the US, people have it figured out, like that particular subproblem that I want to work on. There's probably someone like filling that gap. And if you don't see someone doing the thing that you want to do, it's probably because no one's doing it right now. And I think the kind of like people underestimate the effect and impact of just proactively going in and filling gaps and just being proactively useful. And I think that one thing that is good about the Bay Area in particular, for example, if you're good at something, people will make you do it. It's not like I think in Europe, like you do have to jump through a specific amount of hoops and follow a little bit more of a normal career path. And in the Bay, if you're good at it, no one cares how young you are. You're just going to end up becoming the person that does that thing with the salary attached and so forth. So I think this is definitely something that I learned coming here, which was really positive and inspiring for me. And if you perhaps can think a little bit more about like general kind of like strategies that one could use when networking, what have you found to be effective? And I know this is like a weird question because it feels a little bit awkward, but I think that there are definitely ways to do it better and ways to do it poorer. Do you know of any super tricks here?
Well, I like this book, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. Basically, you want to take control of the social situations you find yourself in. If you see a group of people, these are all potential assets for you. And I know some of us are introverts. I'm an introvert myself. It took me a long time to be able to do this. But we really need to practice, and you can practice this at any event you go to, just going up to people and trying to find out how you can help them. Because if you find out how you can help them, then they will help you, right? So networking is not about, gee, what can all these people do for me? Yes, we'll get there, but that's not how you start, right? You start by, gee, what can I do for them? And if you come at it with that attitude, they will love to hear from you, right? And if you do, even if you say, gee, I know someone who would be interested in your work, you've already helped them, right? So you want to start making those connections all the time. And we'll talk, I think later in the interview, Allison, I think is going to ask me about some other projects that I want you to do. And they're all related to this. It's a huge percentage of your success, no matter where you are, is going to be in relationships. So it doesn't matter if you're doing science or technology. It doesn't matter how good you are. The only way to be successful is through relationships. So no matter how technical you are, we've got to get you thinking this way as being equally important with your science and technology background. It's the only way to be successful in this world.
Yeah. And I think perhaps like seeing networking more as a long game of, I think the first times around when you meet someone, especially if you're more junior, like being as helpful as you can and like waiting for this like long-term reciprocal altruism to kick in, where, you always meet, I think, several times really in life, at least if it goes well. And later on, people will remember that. And I think, yeah, being like helpful first is useful. I think also sometimes when I would like to speak with someone, but I may not exactly know an in, there's usually a reason why you're interested in meeting that person. And usually, especially at conferences, for example, when I have a rough idea of what they're doing, I just really read up on their bio and approach them and ask them a very specific question about their work. And I think the better research that question is, the more interested they are in actually engaging with you, because they know that you have not only a rough understanding of their work, but they have dug a little bit deeper. And people are always interested to talk about their stuff, especially if it's a smart question and something that they may still be grappling with, but maybe haven't written about yet. And so I usually find that direct questions from meeting new people are usually interesting, or at least when I get asked them from other folks, I'm like really excited to jump on this, but much more so than if it was a general introduction or something.
Yeah, Allison.
And
just to add to that, you can do that by email also. And the other thing is, if you're dealing with a famous person who has, say, written a number of books, don't ask them about their most famous book. Ask them about their least famous book, because nobody ever asks about that book, and that depresses them. So they'll get very excited if you ask them about their least famous book.
Yeah, I agree. Any other tips for how to like email or converse via social media or something with people that are incredibly busy or a little bit further up on the seniority level?
Yeah, I have heard that it is okay these days to assume that people did not see your first email, right? So you email somebody, maybe it's a cold email, you don't know them, you have no connection to them. It's okay to resend it and just to bump it up to the top of their box. These are, even if they're a famous person, they're getting huge volumes of email. So you have to craft that subject line really carefully to try to make it clear, as Allison explained, that you just have one very quick question about, and you can name that least favorite book, and that will jump out at them. I have read it's okay to do that 3 times. That's the rule these days. You can hit somebody with 3 emails before you go, all right, I guess they're just not going to answer. I've never hit somebody that hard, but if you're determined to accomplish something, what's the worst thing that can happen? They go, oh, that person, but they're going to forget it immediately. So, the downside is very small.
Yeah, I agree. I also usually think subject lines are incredibly important. Make it, and we know that from crafting our newsletters, like the subject line usually should tell them exactly what it is that they can expect from this email and making it like interesting enough. And ideally, if you can also put in brackets the amount of time that it requires them to get through your request. If it's short, that's usually very useful. And the shorter they are, the better. I really do find that those are the emails that I find just much easier in answering, because even if you have several different requests for a specific person, start with one. If I get an email and I'm on the fly somewhere and someone asks me one request, I'm much more likely to respond to one request than if it's 1, 2, 3. Then I will bring it into my email chain, and at which point it may never get done. And so the easier it is for someone to like just opt in and give you something back, then you have them on a hook and you can start conversing with them. And I think even they are like making it extremely easy for them to digest your email and useful for them also to converse with you. So any things that you may have in terms of links that they may not know about, but that is definitely interesting to them, sharing that, I think, is usually like just a nice kind of like way of saying thank you for them having given you your time, their time. Okay, wonderful. Well, maybe if we can get into a little bit more of the parts of learning about mistakes, because that is definitely something that I think is kind of still undervalued. Like I thought it was incredibly difficult to have my first failures, and I'm not sure how I would have handled them if you had been in the room. But do you have any advice there of just when you get a real setback, like something that you can't just like talk yourself into having been a success in disguise? How to do it?
Yeah. The main types of mistakes that I've made and that people in the general foresight community make is that this group of people is very bright overall. So we expect the world to be smarter than it actually is. Okay. And the same thing with ethics and altruism. We tend to be ethical. We expect everybody else to be ethical. We tend to be altruistic. We expect others to be altruistic. And as I was saying earlier, that's not necessarily how the world is. It's not necessarily the case that I'm saying people are bad. It's just that they are very preoccupied with their own personal situation and maintaining their income. They basically have no time for anything else. So the mistake we make in planning our careers and our projects in general is we expect things to go faster than they will. We expect, people will understand my idea. People will get excited about my idea because they'll understand it. They don't even have time to read your idea, right? There's basically nobody out there. That's a way to think about it. There's not much out there. So the consistent error we make is expecting things to go faster. And then over the decades, what we learn is, okay, that is just completely wrong. We have to, if we want to go this far, it's going to take probably not just twice that, but 5 times that, maybe 10 times, or even more. And instead of trying to go this far in a certain period of time, we're only going to be able to go this far. So it's a hard lesson. It's an unpleasant lesson. It means everything is more expensive and takes more time. So in your plans, it's just necessary to put up with that and not be surprised and upset when we find, oh, this is taking a lot longer than I expected. You have to go into your projects with that as an assumption. The saying is, it takes longer. That's because everything takes longer. That's just how the world works. I suppose once in a great while, there's a surprise, but it's so rare. Don't count on that, okay? The other problem we run into is distraction, especially in this noisy information world that we're in today. I would recommend the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. He is very good at helping you figure out, all right, how am I going to find the time to do the exciting, challenging work that I need to do, given how busy and noisy the world is? How can I block out that time and actually get myself to do it? So that's a useful book that will help you avoid these mistakes. If you actually want to get things done, you have to have a realistic plan, which means you understand it takes longer. And then you have to put in the hours, which is just grueling. It's a lot of work to get anything done. Cal Newport's advice is be so good they can't ignore you. That's how that's how good you have to be, because the world is such a noisy, busy place now. So that would be my basic advice on that.
Yeah, I also think the distraction piece holds more generally in the sense that oftentimes people want you to do things with them and for them. And sometimes they have funding available or attached to it. And it's easy to just get sidelined because perhaps they have a high reputation already in your field. But instead, there's a big trade-off, which is you're not doing what you're actually trying to do for yourself to get the best in your individual domain. And it can sometimes be useful to do that, just to get a little bit of that more social glue and social networking to do. I don't think you should never do that, but just be aware of the opportunity cost of doing and getting better at the things that you uniquely are positioned to do. Cool. Any other best career advice that you want to share that you got?
One thing you and I were discussing earlier was, how do you stay current with industry trends and best practices? And since we're in different industries, we're going to bump up a level and say, well, how do you know what the heck is going on in the world in general, especially in my area, whatever your area may be? And the general answer is, by the time a piece of news or information has gotten into print in some kind of publication, it's not necessarily very new, right? If you really want to know what's going on, the very latest information, the inside information, you have to deal directly with people. This can be in private chats online. It can be by email. It can be by phone. The best way is in person, in terms of, will people tell you what is really going on in any field? What shows up in the industry newsletters and the publications? First of all, it's generally out of date, but often it's not even really correct. The inside gossip is what you want. And to get that, you have to interact, as I said earlier, you have to interact with human beings. And the more private, the better. There are things people won't put in email that they will tell you to your face if you can get together with them. So that would be it. Again, we're back to relationships, developing that supportive network that you need to be successful. And that's how you're going to get real information in your field.
Yeah, on the topic of supportive network, you also once told me that like the Kickstarter for getting anything done is holding a gathering or a conference on it. And I've been definitely following that absolutely very, very diligently, and it really works. You want to share a few more?
Yes, I would say it doesn't matter what field you're in or whether it's academia or industry or nonprofit, whatever space it is. If you convene meetings in that space, you are seen as an automatic leader. And you get to meet all the other leaders, right? Suddenly you're a leader. You get to meet all the other leaders because the leaders are the ones you invite to speak. And you can invite anyone to speak. It's always a compliment to be invited to speak at a gathering. Even if you can't pay their travel costs, it's still a compliment to invite someone to speak. So you should aim high, right? You can invite anyone to speak at your gathering, at your workshop, your conference. That way you get to meet all the VIPs, and you should always MC those events yourself. You should be the one up in front of the group who introduces the speakers, explains why this person was invited, why their topic is important. And then at the end of their talk, you can do a quick summary and say, well, here's what we just learned. That way you are the interpreter to the whole audience. You're the ones teaching them what is important. It's hard to see what's a more powerful way to spread your particular perspective. You can explain how all this supports whatever your favorite topic is, which is the topic of the event. And even if it's only 10 people or even 5 people, it's still super valuable to do this. If you read back on the early meetings in artificial intelligence, you see all these big names, but they were tiny meetings. But that's how they get started. So feel free to take that leadership role. If this is just something you assume, nobody gives it to you, you just start doing it. And the budgets can be very low. All you need is a meeting space, really.
Yeah, and I think ideally for others to develop skin in the game, they should be actively getting something out of the conference and also being able to contribute their ideas. So we've mostly been doing unconference styles, or at least have a big part of one of our events always be a little bit more working group focus and something so that people can actually start sharing their own ideas and can create a little bit more of a long-term community. I'll be also doing a longer session on this when I have my little hello session with you guys at the next one. And I'll be talking a little bit more strategically about how do you set up specific programs? How do you invite people? How do you run events? How do you do individual ops bits to actually get outputs from these events afterwards? It's a lot of work, but I think it usually pays off. Okay, final question for me to you, and then maybe we can cut the recording and move on to all of you guys, which is, I think, the long one that you've done a fellowship session, I think, in the last year. And I think one thing that you pointed out, which really stuck with people afterwards, based on our surveys, is the kind of work-life balance and really planning your life for the long run. And so planning your life so that you can go the long way in the specific field that you're interested in. And so I'd love to ask you, perhaps as a final question, how do you go about that? Because I think it's very easy, especially when you're young, to get swept away in the excitement of a specific field. And you, as having pulled through with your kind of passion and dream for so long, how the heck do you figure out the work-life balance?
Yeah, that's a challenge. The more excited you are by your work, the harder it is to do that work-life balance. But the more important it is that you focus on it, because I would say one thing that people have trouble remembering when they're really young is that health and family have to come first. So when you're young, generally you're super healthy, so you don't think about it, which is wonderful. You have a lot of health capital, right? You've got a lot of health capital, you've got a lot of youth capital. Over time, your youth capital will go away, okay? So the goal is, how can I convert that youth capital to ongoing health capital? How can I maintain my health as much as possible? Unless you have your physical health and, of course, your mental health, none of your work is going to go well, right? So yes, it's absolutely essential. So and then family is something, when we're young, we don't necessarily think too much about it, because you are surrounded by family as a young person and they support you. That's what it's all about in the early days. But most of us find, as time passes, that family becomes more important to us rather than less. So it's something that I don't think we have time to do family here. So let's focus on health. Most important is sleep. I wear this sleep tracking ring, the Oura sleep tracking ring, and that gives me feedback, and my performance is directly impacted by that. There's just no question about it. So unless you sleep super well, you should wear the ring. And even if you sleep well now, over time, you will not, because as we get older, we don't sleep so well. So this is super useful. Here's a book. I can't get it. Sound Sleep, Sound Mind. Your work performance depends directly on that. So don't mess that up. So sleep, nutrition. It's tempting to eat sugar to keep going. Don't do that. Caffeine's probably not the way to do it either. If you want to have steady mental energy, you want protein and healthy fat. Don't rely on sugar. Don't do the sugar substitutes. Those will make you fat. It's a bad idea. And caffeine, I'm off caffeine. But if you are off caffeine and you do ever need it, it's super powerful. In fact, even chocolate gets me going now. So it's useful. Then you have caffeine as a tool rather than something you're dependent on. Exercise, I know it's tempting to not do that especially when you're young. You've got to get into a routine and just do it. It's like brushing your teeth. You've got to do it. And if you want to get a benefit for your work while you exercise, you can just go for a walk. Don't listen to podcasts. Just think about things on your walk. Think about your work, and you will have great ideas on your walk. It's like being in the shower, right? You get great ideas in the shower, you get great ideas on a walk, and you're getting your exercise. For stress reduction, I recommend brain training. Most people call it meditation, but it's really brain training. Basically, you're tweaking the weights of which parts of your brain are more active and less active. And if you want to be healthy in the long term, you want to have some control over that. You don't want to let the most annoying part of your brain take over 100% of your time, which is what it will do unless you train it down. You got to decrease the influence of that part of the brain. For stress reduction, I also do a gratitude journal. Most people think that means only me being grateful for other things. But it turns out if you want health benefits from your gratitude journal, you also record other people being grateful to you for things. And that makes sense if you think about the evolutionary reason for it, which is one reason we stay healthy is that we are needed by our tribe. And that's what the placebo effect is. The placebo effect is somebody wants me to get well. Oh, I guess I'm important. I'm important to the tribe. I better stick around. So I think there's science behind this. So I recommend brain training, which they call meditation, and the various forms of stress reduction. If you do those things, I know it takes some time, but what you want to do is maintain your current level of energy and mental ability for many decades. And if you have to put these in place, if you want to be as productive when you're 60 as you are now, and you're going to need those decades because you're ambitious, you got big plans, it's going to take a long time to do your project. You don't want to burn out when you're 40, right? So you need that energy.
I think with many of these, it's the kind of, you only know that you should have done them when it's too late. Because you only see, for example, meditation is most useful when you're actually in a super stressful situation. But it really helps to have meditated a while back before that, so you can know how to handle that stress. Usually people start meditating after they have a midlife crisis or after something really bad happens to them, and they now know that they need to take care of it, but it's really preventative too. And so it's the same for all the health stuff. So I think starting early, even though you think you don't need it, will come in handy when you will actually end up needing it. And it's more like a when rather than an if. Okay, wonderful.